MararaWaves.com.
The news at this time comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. To begin the news, here's a look at the leads. The Private Sector Commission has nominated a well-known business executive to sit on the board that will govern how the oil revenues will be spent. A man has been shot and injured at a bar on the east bank of Demerara. In regional news, Cubans are facing a fuel shortage. Reggae star Jacure has been sentenced for manslaughter in the Netherlands. And for the international news, we'll bring to you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now the news in detail. The Private Sector Commission, PSC, has nominated well-known business executive Ramesh Doku to sit on the board of the Natural Resources Fund, NRF. PSC Chairman Paul Chung has confirmed that Mr. Doku has been nominated because he is best suited for the role.
Well, he has, I mean, you know, Mr. Dupi, he has the experience, I mean, in different investments and many other fields. I mean, he has wide-ranging experience, he's mature.
PSC Chairman Paul Chung. The Parliamentary Appointments Committee, on which the government has a majority, has already picked former Bauxite executive Dunstan Barrow. He is also a former People's National Congress reform parliamentarian. The President of Guyana can also legally appoint 3 other members of the Natural Resource Fund Board. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform PNCR, Aubrey Norton, publicly urged the government to subsidize the cost of basic consumer items. He issued the call against the backdrop of rising cost of living, largely due to the war between Russia and Ukraine. He says that the items that should be subsidized should include flour, cooking oil, rice, and milk. The PNCR also wants the government to provide a market supplement to low-wage workers, expand the school feeding program to cover 2 to 3 nutritious meals a day, and increase the public assistance program. Meanwhile, Mr. Norton is urging that more food be grown and that stockpiles be established across the country. A taxi driver from Soesdijk, East Bank, Demerara, has been shot and injured. Police say the 30-year-old man was drinking with a number of friends at Freedom Bar when a man walked up to him and shot him to his left side leg. The incident occurred on March 17th, but it was only Tuesday that police issued a release. Investigators were informed that the identifiable man approached him, withdrew a silver handgun from his waist, and fired the single shot. Police are yet to arrest the assailant. The taxi driver's condition has been listed as stable. And now in regional news. Long lines continued to be formed at gas stations in the Cuban capital, Havana. It follows local media reports of fuel rationing in at least one province amid a biting economic crisis, which has already left food and medicine in short supply on the island. Giobel Quintero, a program coordinator for the Matanzas provincial government, told local media that rationing had begun in the province on Sunday. He, however, downplayed the problem and blamed the shortage mainly on distribution issues. Quintero said in the report that state-owned Transcoupet, which supplies fuel in the country's gas stations, was operating only 62% of its vans due to logistical problems. News of the rationing quickly spread through the neighboring province of Havana, where the remaining fuel was picked up quickly on Sunday, leaving little petrol and diesel available at stations in Havana on Monday. Officials in Cuba have previously blamed the decades-long U.S. embargo and more recent harsh sanctions on the former U.S. President Donald Trump for making foreign fuel imports to the island more difficult. Cuba's ailing fuel supply is also a result of dwindling domestic production, limited refining capacity, and reliance on ally Venezuela, which has its own production problems, according to Jorge Piñon, a professor and energy policy expert at the University of Texas at Austin. Reggae star Jacure was convicted of attempted manslaughter and sentenced to 6 years in prison in the Netherlands on Tuesday. The behind these prison walls singer was found not guilty of attempted murder by the court, which rejected his self-defense claim. Netherlands Public Prosecution Service told Observer Online that the 43-year-old man was sentenced to 6 years in prison with credit for time served for attempted manslaughter. His claim of self-defense was rejected by the court. Franklin Watimena, press officer of the Jacure's legal team, says he may choose to appeal the ruling in the Netherlands Court of Appeal. He was arraigned in the Netherlands court last year and spent his 43rd birthday as well as Christmas and New Year's Day behind bars. Jacure, whose given name is Sikaturi Alcock, is facing attempted murder, attempted manslaughter, aggravated assault, or attempted aggravated assault. It was in relation to an alleged stabbing incident involving event promoter Ricardo Blake called Papa on October 1st, 2021 at Dam Square in the city center of Amsterdam. Jacure was in Amsterdam for a performance. In Antigua, the government is facing another ultimatum as a consequence of last Tuesday's fuel hike. The Antigua and Barbuda's Workers' Union has joined the chorus of people and organizations objecting to the 25% increase in gas and diesel prices. The union is calling on the government to rescind its decision, not in part, but in entirety, and introduce measures that will stem the rising tide in the cost of basic food items that is destroying the already declining standard of living. Should the Prime Minister and his administration ignore this call, the union warns that then it will find other ways to use the power of its membership to put the brakes on the way these matters of state are dealt with. These other measures were not disclosed, however. The ABU is contending that such a significant increase should not have been implemented without broad-based consultation with a range of stakeholders, including the unions. According to the Workers' Union, this increase directly impacts the pockets of thousands of workers, and its implications and justifications should have been ventilated at the consultation table and not dictated via the airwaves. The administration is reminded that such adjustments in the cost of living directly affect the negotiations and agreements that unions have already undertaken with employers. Therefore, the ABU considers Brown's unilateral approach as not only an attack on the well-being of the working class, but an insult to their bargaining institutions. Finally, ABU reminds the administration that it offered minimal support to the workforce throughout the pandemic. And in St. Martin, helicopter flights can no longer take off and land on yachts owned by the Isle of Man firm Louvier in St. Martin's territorial waters. The head of the Aviation and Shipping Department, Louis Halley, says the decision has been taken in line with European Union sanctions against Russian-owned yachts. The Aviation Department's withdrawal of the license has been ordered by Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport and Telecommunications, Roger Lawrence. On October 28, 2021, the minister had granted a license by ministerial order to Louvier Limited Operations Officer Alison O'Donoghue to take off and land on the Russian-owned mega yachts Eclipse, Garcon, Solaris when they were in St. Martin's territorial waters. The permit was valid until November 20, 2022. The ministerial order states that due to the situation in Ukraine, it is necessary for St. Martin to implement the new EU sanctions as a matter of urgency. St. Martin is obliged to implement the international sanctions imposed by the United Nations and the European Union. And now for the international news, here's the latest news bulletin from the BBC World Service.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russian forces of using the exclusion zone around the Chernobyl nuclear plant to prepare fresh attacks. He made the accusation in an address to the Japanese parliament, the latest in a series of speeches to lawmakers in allied nations. There's been a 30-kilometre exclusion zone around Chernobyl since the nuclear disaster in 1986, but there have been clashes there since Russia invaded in February. Mr. Zelensky told Japanese MPs about life for those under Russian occupation in Ukraine. His words are voiced by a translator.
In some villages which are occupied by the Russian troops, our people cannot even bury their dead relatives, and they have to bury them on site at their homes. Thousands of people, and among them 121 children, were dead.
A last-minute policy reversal by the Taliban in Afghanistan has upset tens of thousands of teenage girls, as secondary schools were shut just hours after they reopened. The government news agency said the leadership is making a decision over the uniform of female students. From Kabul, Sekunda Kamani reports.
At one school in the west of Kabul, some of the teenage pupils burst into tears when they learned they would not in fact be resuming lessons. Many had earlier talked of how happy and excited they were to be back in the classroom. Under Taliban rule in the 1990s, girls were banned from getting an education. Since they took power last August, only girls' primary schools, along with all boys' schools, have remained open in most of the country. Girls' secondary schools were finally meant to reopen today. Privately, Taliban members admit female education remains a controversial issue amongst their most hardline elements.
A court in the Netherlands has ruled against 4 Nigerian widows in their lawsuit against the oil giant Shell over the execution of their husbands by the Nigerian government in 1995. It said there was not enough evidence to support the widows' claim that Shell had been involved in bribing witnesses related to the case. The widows had accused the company of joint responsibility with the Nigerian government for their husbands' deaths. One widow gave her reaction to the ruling.
I was ready for either way. Okay. So my story has been heard first.
I'm not disappointed.
People know what happened to my husband, that he was killed by Shell and the support of they joined their hand together with the Nigerian government. So my story is out there. I'm glad, I'm happy, I'm excited. So the battle continues.
Their husband's execution followed the violent suppression by the Nigerian government of demonstrations by the Ogoni people against oil pollution. BBC News. Gunmen have attacked the sprawling international airport complex outside the Somali capital Mogadishu. A column of smoke can be seen rising from the area, which hosts hotels, the offices of international organisations and diplomatic missions. There are reports of deaths. State television said the security forces were fighting terrorists. The Islamist group Al-Shabaab said its militants were attacking the biggest foreign military base in Somalia. India says it has stopped groups of Sri Lankan nationals who are trying to leave the island by boat as the economic situation worsens. Our South Asia correspondent Rajini Vaidyanathan has more.
Since Tuesday, at least 16 Sri Lankan nationals, half of them children, have been found on boats as they try to leave the island nation for India. The numbers might be small, but their stories reflect the growing desperation in Sri Lanka as the country's economy teeters on the verge of collapse. For weeks, basics like fuel have been in short supply. There are regular power cuts. As prices reach record highs, protests have turned violent as people queued for petrol. A slowdown in tourism and foreign investment during the pandemic are key reasons behind this crisis.
Police in Hungary have arrested a 27-year-old man wanted in connection with the murder in Paris last Saturday of the former Argentine international rugby player Federico Aramburu. Police say the detained man is a former soldier, a member of the French far-right GUD movement. He's suspected of shooting and killing Mr. Aramburu in a bar in the Saint-Germain district of the French capital after an altercation. The world's #1 female tennis player Ashley Barty has announced her retirement at the age of just 25. The Australian tennis star made the shock announcement on social media, saying she was leaving to chase other dreams. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, which results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. The Private Sector Commission has nominated a well-known business executive to sit on the board that will govern how the oil revenues will be spent. A man has been shot and injured at a bar on the east bank of Demerara. In regional news, Cubans are facing a fuel shortage. Reggae star Jacure has been sentenced for manslaughter in the Netherlands. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.